Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on our live handles of YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. This is a very important conversation about the RBI's decision to withdraw the 2000 rupee notes. My colleague Ritu Singh is joining us to help us understand and make sense of this huge development. Ritu, good afternoon. How are you doing this Saturday afternoon?
Good afternoon, Archana. Very well. Not in the least bit concerned as I was in 2016 when demonetization has happened. Look at us. We're in our houses right now, not
Yes.
queuing up in front of ATM. So huge difference.
Yes. So, what are you planning to do with your 2000 rupee note?
Well, I must confess, I have very little cash in my house and zero 2000 rupee notes. So I'm not one of those that will have to exchange them.
All right. So, people have been asking questions, and the government and the RBI, everybody has urged them to not panic because this is not a demonetization exercise. It is
Yeah.
essentially that the 2000 rupee note will not be circulated anymore. It will not be printed anymore.
Yeah.
What can people do now? Can they use their money for transactions if they have to buy something? And there is a deadline to deposit them back. What can you tell us about that?
Well, firstly, yes, the big takeaway is that your 2000 rupee note continues to be a legal tender, which means if you give it to your vendors or you give it to your bank account, your bank relationship manager, nobody can refuse to accept these notes because they are very much legal tender. You can use them to make transactions up until September 30th. In fact, even after that, the understanding is it will continue to remain legal. It's just that RBI has encouraged public that if you hold these notes, try and exchange them at your bank, for newer currency for different denomination notes, because after that it wants to withdraw these currencies from circulation. So it will remain legal tender. The idea is to encourage public to go ahead and exchange it at their local bank branches.
Right. So you're saying that it will be legal tender on 1st October as well.
Yes. So the window for exchange of these 2000 rupee notes, if you have them, it starts on the 23rd of May. And RBI said that up until the end of September this year, you're encouraged to exchange it at your bank. But it does not say anywhere that, come the 1st of October, what happens to your notes? It does not become illegal. So it will continue to be legal. See, if you look at past examples, for instance, what RBI does and in regular intervals is it tries to phase out the old bank notes. So, for instance, what happened in 2014 is it came out with a similar circular. None of us were alarmed at that time because we hadn't gone through demonetization and we weren't looking at it with the same lens. So, what happened in 2014 is RBI said all bank notes that were issued before 2005, 2004 were going to be phased out from circulation. And it gave the public time again for a few months to go ahead and exchange these notes at their local bank branches, etc. And for people that had missed the deadline, it's not like that currency became invalid or that money got wasted, which they were holding in hand. All they had to do is, go through a little more trouble where they had to furnish their identity, proof of, how they had that money, etc. And they were able to exchange it. So the idea is just to, remove these from circulation under the clean note policy, which is essentially replenishing currency after regular intervals. It is not really to say that this is being demonetized, because that has a very different implication altogether.
Yes, I want to pick up on that. You said that this is not demonetization. People are split over it, polarized over it. Why is it? Could you help us understand the difference between this exercise and what happened when that very famous 8 p.m. announcement was made by the Prime Minister?
Well, first of all, the Reserve Bank of India does not have the power to demonetize. It is very much with the central government. We've not heard the central government say that 2000 rupee notes are demonetized. So don't worry about it. Now, what does demonetization itself mean? It means the value that you see on the currency, it says 2000 rupees. It is divorced from that value. So that rupee does not carry the worth of 2000 rupees anymore. That is what we refer to as demonetization. And also it has legal implications. So if a 2000 rupee note were to be demonetized, which it is not, then if you were found holding a 2000 rupee note, there would be implications, which is not the case here. All RBI do is phase this out because it was intended for a very specific purpose. Now, why was 2000 rupee introduced in the first place? So what happened in November 2016, as we all remember, suddenly overnight, 8 o'clock, you had the Prime Minister come on television and say 500 rupee and 1000 rupee notes were going to be demonetized effective midnight. So you had only 4 hours to run to your bank and exchange that note if you wanted to use it. After that, there'd be a limited window during which, of course, you were allowed to exchange it, but that was a long, tedious exercise. This is nothing like that. This is very different. And like I said, the idea very much is just to phase out the currency and not to demonetize it. So what happened in 2016 is suddenly almost 80-85% of all the currency in circulation became illegal. So therefore, to flush the system back with liquidity, with currency, RBI had to quickly print these higher denomination notes. So to replace the 500 rupee note and the 1000 rupee notes, they came up with these 2000 rupee notes and they filled the system with it. Even at that time, they were very clear this is for a limited period of time. So when they started printing it in 2016, by 2018, they had started to phase out, and by 2019, they stopped printing 2000 rupee notes altogether. Typical lifespan of a paper note is 4 to 5 years. So we are nearing the end of it, and now under the clean note policy, it is being withdrawn.
Right. Ritu, we have a question from a viewer who has said that where, apart from our banks, are there any other facility where we can exchange our notes? And is there an amount, is there a fee that we have to pay in order to get our 2000 rupee note exchanged?
See, since this is a very much central bank driven exercise, you don't have to pay any fee for exchanging it. So you don't need to worry about that at all. What you need to do is go to any bank branch, even if you're not a customer of that bank, and this is important. You can still go to a bank and you can exchange your money. There is a limit, however. In one go at a time, you can only exchange 20,000 rupees in a bank. Or you could even go to one of the regional offices of RBI, which is present across 19 points. And you can find that on the RBI website to go and exchange your notes. Now, while I say there is a limit of 20,000 rupees at a time for exchange, if you do have, for instance, a hypothetical example, if all of the cash that you hold is in the form of only 2000 rupee notes for some reason, then you can still not worry about it, because if you have an emergency, if you need that cash, you can deposit all of it at a bank branch and in your bank account. There is no restriction on depositing your money. The only restriction is on how much you can exchange at a time. So you can exchange your entire amount over a period of time. At a time, it will be 20,000 rupees, and there's zero fees you have to pay for it.
All right, this is very important that you mentioned the point that it's not just your bank, but any other bank will be willing to accept your money. Another question from a concerned citizen of this country is, what will happen if a bank refuses to exchange? Can any bank refuse to exchange your 2000 rupee note after the deadline is over?
No, actually, banks are not allowed to refuse the exchange of these notes. Like I said, these will continue to remain legal tender. They have not been demonetized. It is not clear at this point of time how the process of exchange will work. And I'm very sure that we'll hear from the Reserve Bank of India before that deadline approaches as to what happens if you have not been able to exchange it. There will be some method. You probably have to furnish, like I said, more proof of income, your identity proof when you exchange it, but you will be able to get your money's worth. It is not going to go waste. But the idea is that ample time has been given to the public. You have 4 months of time between now and the end of September to exchange this money. So please go ahead and do it the earliest possible you can.
Right. Ritu, you said that there is a limit on depositing the 2000 rupee note, which is 20,000 rupees. But is there a limit on depositing a certain amount? Like if you have, is there a cap on the amount of 2000 rupee notes that you can deposit all over until the deadline is there?
Well, let's assume I only deal in cash and I have many lakhs sitting in only 2000 rupee notes. I can take all of it to the bank and deposit it. See, the only thing is you should have a verified KYC account, be a legitimate source of income. And then, yes, you're very much free to deposit all of the money that you have into your bank account. There should be no reason that the bank will not accept it.
Yes, I'm talking about this because essentially when last time this happened, a lot of, say for example, wholesale markets, or if you have markets like in Old Delhi, Chandni Chowk, Chavdi Bazaar, so there were a lot of instances where, like you said, people deal in cash, a huge amount of cash. So which is why I asked this question, that is there a cap on the number of notes that you can deposit? Another question that a viewer is interested in asking is, you mentioned about the clean note policy, and you also said that this is not the first time such an exercise has been undertaken. I also read somewhere that an RBI official said that other countries also do it. So, for the benefit of our viewers, could you help us understand in simple terms why do countries undertake these exercises of circulating new currency and then withdrawing it? How does it help uh, an economy?
See, under the clean note policy, it's very simple. What you have is not a coin, right? It's a paper, a piece of paper in circulation, constantly in use, tends to have wear and tear. So over a period of time, you replace it with cleaner notes. It's exactly what it says. But
Yeah.
the idea very much also is to remove higher denomination notes so that people, if you have higher denomination currency, it becomes easier for people to hoard that cash. And that is exactly what the government and the RBI wants to avoid. It wants the economy to be more digital. Why does it want the economy to be more digital? So that these transactions that are done digitally are easier to track. So any illicit use or any illegal transactions, any hoarding, any black money, all that can be avoided if most of your transactions are done digitally, which can be tracked. Each paise that you spend can be tracked digitally, which may not be the case when it comes to cash money. And therefore, you always see governments trying to discourage the use of cash and encourage the use of digital transactions. Higher denomination notes, like I said, will encourage hoarding. So to make it hard for people who are trying to game the system, the governments usually tend to discourage this.
Okay. Ritu, a lot of critics have said that bringing the 2000 rupee note was an unnecessary exercise. It never served the purpose, which is why we've also seen that the government stopped printing the currency long ago. What, in your view, are the experts saying about this? Was this 2000 denomination note even required? And do you think that it was unnecessary, as the critics have called it since the beginning?
There are both merits and, disadvantages to have introduced this 2000 rupee denomination. But, like I mentioned at the start, for instance, suddenly overnight, if you have 80%, 85% of all the currency in circulation becoming illegal, you have to quickly replace that because, as much as we'd like to be a digital economy, we're very much a cash economy. The cash in circulation is still, the king. So whether you talk about agriculture, you talk about tier 3, tier 4 cities, the use of digital is not as prevalent as we'd like it to be. And so therefore, in 2016, when demonetization was announced and suddenly this currency went out of the system, it had to be replaced quickly. Now, that could not be if you were printing 100 rupee and 200 rupee and 500 rupee notes. You had to go for a higher denomination, which is why, the government and the RBI, they came out with this 2000 rupee denomination currency. And even then, they were very clear. We are going to limit the use of it. We are going to stop printing this at some point of time. This is only to fill the gap at this point. For critics who've been saying it was unnecessary to introduce this 2000 rupee note, other than filling the gap at the moment, at that time, sure, it could have been phased out. Because like I said, a higher denomination encourages easier hoarding of money. So yes, to discourage that, perhaps we should not look at it, but there was a need because of demonetization to quickly replace the currency, and therefore it was necessitated.
Right. Ritu, so far we've discussed the impact of this exercise on the people of this country. And since you cover the banking sector extensively, for the benefit of our viewers, could you tell us the impact of this exercise on our banking system? How will the banks, will they benefit from this exercise or will they suffer? How does it play?
So, if you just go back a few years in 2016, when demonetization had happened, all of us, you and me, had to go to our banks and deposit these 500 and 1000 rupee notes that we had because they were no longer legal tender. And banks benefited from, more deposits accruing because for a bank to make loan, it also has to raise money from somewhere, right? It's not minting money in air. So the cheapest place that the bank can raise money to give a loan is through deposits. Because the deposit rates that you and I earn are what, 4, 4.5%, 5%, in exceptional cases, 7%. So that is the lowest money that the bank would have had to pay to give out a loan, which would have interest rates of 14%, 20%, 25%, depending on what loan you're taking. So it's very good news for banks, yes, because in the near term, some of the currency in circulation will go back into banks. It will also encourage more digital transactions. It will also ease the pressure on deposit rates, because remember, lending rates have been rising. At some point, banks also have to compensate the depositors. So deposit rates have also been rising with the lag. So there'll be some relief on that end. In the near term, this is definitely good for banks. But the 2,000 rupee notes in circulation, they form about 3.5 lakh crores in absolute terms. So it's not a large amount per se. It's only about 10 to 11% of the total currency in circulation. But any cash going back to the banks in the form of deposits, always good news.
All right, that was really helpful, Ritu. Thank you so much for helping us understand the impact of this development. And once again, we would like to reiterate that the government has also said, and the RBI has also urged people to not panic. There is a deadline to exchange this note. It is going to be legal tender. Ritu, would you like to add to it that people do not have to panic, because this time there is ample time?
Absolutely. And let me just summarize in quick points what this is. Number one, if you have 2,000 rupee notes starting the 23rd of May, you can go to any bank branch, not necessarily your own bank, and exchange these with the bank for different denominations. Number two, even if if somehow you miss the deadline of end of September to exchange these notes, it will remain legal tender. It's just that the process of exchanging them may be a little more complicated, and therefore RBI has given you enough time, 4 months' time, to try and exchange this currency. Number three, this is very different from demonetization. The value of the currency is not being divorced from what you see. All they're doing is phasing out the 2,000 rupee notes under the clean note policy. Number five, always intended, the use of 2,000 rupee notes. For instance, I don't know, Archana, do you have 2,000 rupee notes with you?
No, in fact, for this live, I went to the ATM, just to get that, note and, use it for the one last time, but I got a 500 rupee note. So I sincerely tried to get one, but I couldn't find it.
It's only about 10% of all the currency in circulation that is this note. So it's quite likely, like you and me, who are mostly reliant on digital and cards and plastic, may not even have 2,000 rupee. I do not, you do not. I'm sure there would be some that will have it. So you have ample time, do exchange it. It will remain legal. Do not worry. The near impact could be, on agriculture, for instance, or small businesses that are heavily cash dependent, that transact only in cash. So there will be some disruption, but hopefully this 4-month time is enough that you don't have to queue up in panic outside of an ATM. You do not have to do it. So, the idea is not to really cause panic, is to give notice to people, go ahead and exchange it. The use is very low. And if you have any more questions, do write into us and we'll try and answer them for you.
Yeah, and it's also important to spread the message, because you mentioned about farmers. I'm sure these days everybody has access to news. But if you have helps and if you have people who may not be aware of this development, it's important to share this piece of information.
Yeah, in fact, don't try to, sort of get rid of your notes by giving it to people. Please go to your and exchange this if you can. Some people may not be aware and they'll accept it. So, people who are watching this, privileged enough, please go exchange it at your bank.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much, Ritu. With that, it's a wrap on this Q&A session. We will be back with another important session on the stories that you need to understand and to make sense of the big developments. Thank you for tuning in to CNBC-TV18.
Thank you, Archana, and thank you all for your questions.